So before we get started, I'd like to know how you heard about this program. Can you raise your hand if you heard about it through the library? Michael, you seeing this? How about through Greener Glenview's website or newsletter? Students, how did you hear about it?
Teachers.
Yay. Would that be Miss Poppett or Miss Friedman? No?
Friends.
Who?
Friends.
Okay, what about Jessica Pritzker? No? Okay, well, that's good to know. Good to know that the teachers are reading our emails. All right, so we're going to get started. As I said, I'm Sherry Latash, and the program tonight is called Get to Know Glenview's Chicago River. So we'll be talking about, or the speakers will be talking mainly about the West Fork, some about the Middle Fork, I hope, I think. Okay, and I'll introduce each of the speakers when they come up. So our first speaker is going to be Susan Johns. Susan is the president of the Glenview History Center. She is a former history teacher and academic researcher. She has been an active community volunteer since moving to Glenview in 2002, having served as president of the Tall Trees Homeowners Association, member of the Glenview Stormwater Task Force, and moderator of Glenview Community Church. She continues to research and learn about Glenview, its residents, environment, and history. Please welcome Susan Johns.
Thank you. It's good to see you all here tonight. So there is a river in Glenview. Actually, we were doing a downtown tour once, and somebody said they were surprised at how many people didn't know that the river runs through downtown Glenview. There it is. That is an aerial photo from 1938, and you can see the span of the river through Glenview. That's Glenview Road, kind of right in the middle of that photograph. This is what's known as the Scharf map. It was created in the late 1800s to depict the earlier part of the century, Native American trails and camps in the area. We are situated between two waterways, the Des Plaines and the Chicago River, which allowed us access to, at the time, both the lake and the Mississippi. And a lot of those trails went back and forth between the waterways, and some of those same trails are what we use as roads today. Little Fort is Waukegan. I think Deer Trail up there is Glenview Road around our waterways. And so it was along these same paths that European settlers and folks from the east came and established farms and homesteads and along those same waterways and trails. They'd purchase land here, take up farming and industry. They used the North Branch for entertainment, skating on it when it froze over in the winter, paddling, picnics by the river, and also for hunting and fishing. We have an oral history where a young man who moved here in the 20s recalled on Friday afternoons, he was Catholic, his mother telling him to go get some worms and catch some fish for dinner out of the river. Bullheads, he said, and catfish were pretty common. And during the early settlers, and he mentioned that during the Depression, hunting was also a big thing along the river. Rabbits, small mammals, pheasants. I think if you look really closely, you can see the guy seated in the boat there has a shotgun. I don't know exactly what he's hunting. Maybe he's after pheasants. The area was low and wet. I would say it still is low and wet. This is a map that someone produced to reflect Glenview around 1900. You'll see flood areas between Waukegan Road and Church Street. Down Glenview, it would flood down Glenview Road to about Pine Street. It would flood through Henley and Drew Streets. And that lower area was nicknamed Frog Town, the Henley and Dews area. Now, there are conflicting stories about whether it was Frog Town because there were actually a lot of frogs, because it was damp, or whether the people there were referred to as frogs because they were essentially living in a marsh. But there's an interesting number of menus from early taverns that have frog legs on the menu. I'm not sure if they were sourced locally or not, but it was a thing. So Frogtown area there in Glenview. So the waterways and the crossroads were also the site of early industry. That is the Hutchings Mill. It was on, well, Waukegan was known as Mill Street back in the day. And the mill was about where next to Heinen's, about where the funeral home is now. It was not a water wheel powered mill, it was a steam powered mill. Actually one of the first uses of steam power in the township, but they would need a nearby water source for that. Back at the corner, the intersection there of Glenview and Waukegan Road, you'll notice a lot of clusters of buildings, hotels, saloons. Hoffman's there also had an ice house. In the winter when the river froze over, they would harvest ice for the community. And a little further down the road, closer to Lake Ave, the Oak Glen Drain Tile Company. Before we were Glenview, we were actually called Oak Glen for a little while, and the Drain Tile Company was incorporated in the 1880s when we were still called Oak Glen. Again, close to the river, they would need the water source for processing the drain tiles, and the drain tiles would in turn be used on the farms to drain the farmland. So some of our local early industries tied to our waterways. Some more of our first ways across the North Branch were wooden bridges. And the folks who we've interviewed in the past who recalled the wooden bridges said, you know, they did the job, but they kind of swayed under a full horse and cart load. So we're not really good long-term solutions. And shortly, so Glenview incorporated in 1899, and then we have a tax base for things like sidewalks and bridges and all those fun things that come with incorporation. This is the stone bridge over the river at Waukegan Road. The first stone bridge to replace the wooden one was built in 1902. A Melzer was the construction foreman on that, and that's a name that goes back in Glenview quite a ways. And this is a view from the bridge looking southward. So you can see the river, not really a deep channel, just kind of flowing along its way. This is the Grove Street Bridge. That's OLPH in the distance there. Again, folks hanging out on the river banks. And it too was replaced with a concrete bridge in 1916. In the backyard of the History Center, we have both the stone from the 1916 Grove Street Bridge and the 1902 Waukegan Road Bridge. As they were torn down and replaced, those relics came to us. And this is looking at the river from Glenview Road at about Church Street.
Can you dim the lights a little bit?
Oh, thank you.
If that's not too difficult.
Yeah, that might help with the resolution. There you go. Sure. So starting around 1925, they started talking about making Glenview Road go through. So if you look at that map there, you see Waukegan Road, River Drive, and Glenview Road does not go across the river. So the view from the previous view is from one of those two dots kind of to the left of the 35 on Glenview Road. They call this the death curve. I think there was only one actual fatality, but a lot of accidents coming around Waukegan and Glenview Road. So in the early 20s, the village started talking about making the road go through, talking with the county, getting that underway. The L-shaped building to the right of the 35 is what was known as the Blue Heron Inn. Unfortunately, the road obviously would go right through the Blue Heron Inn. They took part of it off and moved it across the road. It became a bakery, I think, and the remainder of the building is still there at the corner of Waukegan and Glenview Road. It's the one with the chimney, with the door through it. It's been many, many things over the years, so it is still there. And so they did straighten the road. The county built a bridge, finished in record time, not only for the state, but the entire country. When was the last time we could say that kind of construction project happened? I don't know. And along with this project, the village decided that they would straighten, widen, and deepen the West Fork of the North Branch of the Chicago River. Bids were let out so this is the ordinance that they passed to do that in January of 1928, and it went out to bid. The whole project was about $52,000. They were going to dredge the entire river from the boundaries of the village north and south. That would have been East Lake Ave to Central at the time. And they got underway. The width of the river at the south end was going to be 35 feet, and the channel itself was going to be no less than 7 feet deep. If the water itself wasn't that deep, then they would build up berms on the sides, the spoil banks. What they excavated from the channel, they used to fill in the previous river channel and build the banks all along the run of the North Branch. That looks a little fuzzy, sorry about that. If it was clearer, you might be able to tell that one of the big straightening efforts was between that Grove Street Bridge and the Glenview Bridge. On the left there is it beforehand, where it juts out a little bit more towards OLPH, and then on the right-hand side, it's straighter. The floodplain is still there, but the river itself has moved away from where OL is. Father Schmidt took a little bit of credit for that. Apparently he bought up some land and he had dirt and soil from sewer projects in the late 19-teens dumped on the property to raise it a little bit. And then the dredging and the widening furthered that enterprise, and we get the straightening of the river between Grove and Glenview Road and the moving of it a little bit. Sorry, that was so blurry. What does the Edens Highway have to do with our river? Well, according to former village president Paul Thomas, there was a gentleman who owned property to the north of Lake Ave. And it was not in the incorporated limits of the village at the time, but he allowed the folks who were building the Edens Expressway to dump on his property for free. They were looking for a place to dump dirt and rubble, and he allowed them to dump there free. He built a swampy low space up about 9 to 10 feet in height, and he did something that is totally illegal now. He took a bulldozer and changed the course of the river. He dug a new channel for the river where it is now between his property and tall trees. So basically this is the property that is now Carillon Square. He built it up. You can see again the river coming towards Lake Ave a little more on the left-hand photo, and then post filling in and straightening, it's moved back, and where Carillon Square is now fairly dry. And those of you who live in Tall Trees know that Tall Trees is not particularly dry. So the river also had waterways, not the West Fork, but another one had an impact on discussions of annexation of property. Glen Oak Acres in 1950, again on the other side of Lake Avenue, so not within the village limits, started talking about joining one municipality or another. Northfield's take on it was, sure, we'll let them in if they pay for what they want, which meant streets and sewers and whatnot, because they had septic and wells at the time. But Northfield wanted all of the property from Glen Oak east to Wilmette, because that would allow them the full run of the Middle Fork. Needless to say, that didn't happen. We know that Glen Oak Acres is part of Glenview, but it was a thought at the time. Heading out that way, this is the bridge on Glenview Road near Harms. And that way, and towards that river, it was a lot about the forest preserve and the golf courses. So there's less talk about it in the early days of Glenview history because it was a lot of outside the bounds of Glenview proper. But as early as, so this headline is from an article, a series of articles in the Tribune in 1919, where they were touting the forest preserves for the city pent. and they ran a 7-part series, I think, on how to get out and about and enjoy the forest preserves. And of course, they could come out this way to our woods, where there were maple groves and trilliums and all sorts of wonderful ways you could spend your day out in the country. And of course, Glenview would play a much bigger role with some of the more eastern portions of the waterway, because we hosted in Harms Woods the Civilian Conservation Corps camp in the 1930s. There were 10 companies, about 2,000 men stationed there, and they were the ones who dug the Skokie lagoons. They would travel back and forth from the camp daily. I think it's something like 900 acres and 4 million cubic yards of earth that they moved to create the Skokie lagoons. And this was a project that came about because, again, low marshy area, a lot of mosquitoes. Interesting newspaper articles at the time. It's either the marsh was on fire because it was dry and it was basically a peat bog, so lots of fuel. It would catch on fire, and the farmers around it were concerned, or it was wet and a breeding ground for mosquitoes. Thus the Civilian Conservation Corps and that big project over that way.
So that's Harms to the left.
Yes.
And that's lake cutting across, so that way the camp was on both sides of the lake?
The camp was between Lake and Glenview.
So this is all south of the
Mhm.
lake, okay.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So the Harms, where the compass is?
Yeah.
Seems to be because it's such south.
Yeah.
Yes.
Upside down.
Get yourself oriented there.
Right. Yeah, it's on the west.
Yes, they were across from Hackney's. And so, since that time, we have been working very hard in Glenview to keep our rivers clean. That is always an issue. This is the Army Corps of Engineers cleaning up the river right by OLPH. And to mitigate flooding, the other big issue. And there have been pretty significant floods in most decades, I would say. Some worse than others. 2007, I think, was our last really, really big one. But again, tall trees. That's the Chestnut Avenue bridge up there on the right with the water just below it. Valley Low buildings right across Chestnut, and obviously that's OLPH downtown, and tall trees, houses. So the farmers knew it back then. We still know it now, but they enjoyed this area, and we still do. I don't know if anybody has been skating on the river recently, though, If you try it, I'd love to hear about it. And I know Robin and John are going to tell us a lot more about our waterways. Jerry?
Right here.
Right there. Do you want to introduce?
Sure. Okay, thank you, Susan. So I neglected to give an important introductory remark, which is when we talk about the North Branch of the Chicago River, we have two forks in Glenview. We have the West Fork, which runs through downtown Glenview, and we have the Middle Fork that runs through Woods and Blue Star Memorial Woods. So that might have been a little confusing.
Sorry. I didn't start you out with the geography.
But the good news is that you can rewatch this program because the library is recording it. And it'll make more sense to you now that you have that information. So we will be taking questions at the end. So please hold your questions. And now I'm going to introduce John Quayle. John Quayle is the Director of Policy and Conservation for Friends of the Chicago River. He has worked for over 20 years at Friends, identifying potential areas for restoration or habitat improvement, managing Friends' restoration and habitat strategy, and coordinating Friends' policy efforts. This work has resulted in hundreds of acres of restored land and riparian improvements throughout the Chicago River system, reconnecting the waterway through removal of 4 dams and recreational access points throughout the city and suburbs. He also coordinates Friends' advocacy efforts aimed at improving water quality, creating equitable access, and protecting the Chicago-Calumet River system for all people, water, and wildlife. He possesses an extensive knowledge of the natural and human geography of the watershed, having developed many relationships and an understanding of the cultures of different agencies and municipalities over his tenure with Friends. He has a degree in environmental policy and behavior from the University of Michigan. In October 2025, the Chicago Wilderness Alliance honored John with its Force of Nature Award, given to individuals and organizations for extraordinary leadership in regional conservation, environmental protection, and restoration. Please welcome John Quayle.
Thank you, everybody. Just get mine down here. I got it, yeah. Okay. Thank you for such a warm welcome. I'm going to have to thank my communications director for the big bio. I didn't realize it was so extensive. So thank you, everybody, for coming tonight. So I'm going to talk a little bit to start about what Friends is, Friends of Chicago River, and what we do. So like Sherry said, my name is John Quill. I'm the Director of Conservation and Policy for Friends of the Chicago River. Our mission is to protect and restore the Chicago-Calumet River system for all people, plants, water, and wildlife. We do that through really 3 main project areas: policy and planning. That's where I spend some of my time. On-the-ground projects. We're going to talk a little bit more about that today. So that's like habitat restoration and big projects that affect the landscape. And then education and outreach. So good to hear some students are here today. We have a big Chicago River Schools Network program that has a curriculum for kids of all ages. So this is the area that we work. This is the entire Chicago-Calumet River watershed. A watershed is an area of land that drains into a body of water. So everything inside of that line ends up in the Chicago or Calumet River system. If you think about sort of watershed as a Russian nesting doll, if you've ever heard of anybody ever heard of the Continental Divide and the Rocky Mountains, that's the difference between the Mississippi watershed and the Pacific Ocean watershed. So that's kind of how that works. So here we are, we're in the middle of the Chicago River watershed. This watershed is roughly 1,000 square miles. 156 linear miles of waterways. 75% of that is a natural shoreline. That surprised a lot of people considering where we are right now. 37,000 acres of open space are within a half mile of the river. Passes through some of the densest urban areas in the world, suburban communities, rural communities, and protected natural lands. We have 100+ municipalities and 2.1 million people live within a half mile of the river system. So I can't go further without plugging Chicago River Day coming up on Saturday, May 9th. I saw a couple River Day shirts, or at least one out there. That's great to see. So I think we have 85 sites this year. So if the weather's good, we'll have around 4,000 volunteers all over the watershed from 9 to 12 on Saturday. I know there's still space left at Techney Basin in Glenview. We have our site captain right over here who's willing to take more volunteers. So go on chicagoriver.org for information and sign up for that. So just a little bit of quick background. The Chicago River was historically polluted and neglected. We talked about straightening a curve. That's what's happening in that picture on the left. That's where, if you hear about a project called the 78, where the Chicago Fire Stadium is going to be, that's right where that big giant curve is, and it's straight now. So that was to create a big parcel and really to make it so that barges wouldn't have to turn. And the Chicago River has had issues with industrial pollution, and the saying used to be dilution is the solution to pollution, and that's not really the case. And that's something the Chicago River has dealt with through many years, and now it's something that is valued and celebrated throughout its entire watershed. So that's from the headwaters that we'll talk about in a minute, all the way downtown through the Calumet system. The Chicago River is being utilized as park space and open space and as an economic driver. The Architectural Boat Tour is routinely rated as one of the best tourism attractions in the world, which is great to see. The Chicago River Walk. I was at a hotel in Seattle doing the elliptical, and they have a little, like, you can choose your vista that you want to do, and it was Paris, the Black Forest in Germany, and the Chicago River Walk. And I'm like, wow, we've really come a long way. So that was great to see. So we talked a little bit about the history of the North Suburbs. Here's some of those Civilian Conservation Corps guys digging the Skokie Lagoons. But really what happened was the river, from its natural state of a real swampy, intermittent stream that maybe didn't flow all year round during dry seasons, was harnessed for agriculture first and development second. Dredged, the river was dredged, straightened, and widened in a lot of places. We heard about that. If you want to waste a lot of money, pay to dredge a river. But that's a different story for a different day. So right now we're in the North Branch of the Chicago River, and that's kind of what I'm going to focus on today. So the North Branch of the Chicago River is always, the section of the river that was never reversed. So the North Branch of the Chicago River has always flowed from its headwaters up near Great Lakes Naval Training Center into the city of Chicago. This map is significant because it shows the watershed of the North Branch of the Chicago River, but it also shows the sewer shed of the North Branch of the Chicago River. Because sewers and municipal sewers have subverted so much of the natural drainage environment, it's really important that we consider those structures when we make decisions. So the southern boundary of this watershed is roughly Dempster, and that is the line between what are called separated storm sewers and combined storm sewers. So that means everything upstream of that line, including all of Glenview, means that when rain falls on the street, it goes right to the river without any kind of treatment. South of that line, it goes to a treatment plant and gets treated, but it also means that water can inundate that system and you have sewage overflow. So the trade-off here is you get a first flush of stormwater into our system that can be dirty. It can have road oil and grit and things in it. But what we don't have are sewage overflows into the river. So it's part of living in an urban environment, a heavily urbanized environment. So the North Branch has 3 forks in the headwaters going from east to west, the Skokie River. So that includes the Skokie Lagoons, goes all the way up to the Great Lakes Naval Training Center. That's where the headwaters of the river are, of the Skokie River. The middle fork of the North Branch of the Chicago River starts in a field just across from Abbott Park, Abbott Labs in Libertyville, a field that has a bunch of white fringed prairie orchid, which is a state threatened species. And then the West Fork, which flows, which is mostly in Glenview, most of Glenview, the Chicago River is the West Fork. Some of the middle fork begins in Lincolnshire at a place called North Park, just across from Everett Road. And that is where that's where the landscape drains and the watershed drains and forms a channel. And that channel continues all the way to where those forks combine into the city. And then you think of the Chicago River as it goes to the North Branch of the north side of the city. This watershed is significantly developed. We did a watershed study about 10 years ago, and we found that of the development in this, there's about 30% open space available in this entire watershed. That's a key number because that's what you need to maintain water quality standards. So once a watershed gets beyond 30% open space or permeable land, which means it's not pavement or rooftops or things like that, you begin to lose the ability to make gains back and improve that water quality. One thing that's lucky here and sort of is a nice factor of flooding over the years is that much of the middle fork, as Susan mentioned, is protected in golf courses and forest preserves because it was really unbuildable a lot of the time because it flooded so frequently. But that does mean that many of our river channels, especially as you go north out of the city, is protected and ringed by natural land, like I talked about, all those tens of thousands of acres within a half mile of the river system. That provides a tremendous buffer for water quality improvements, and it provides a lot of natural habitat for animals and things like that. Our next speaker and myself have been working on a group called the North Branch Watershed Project, or now it's called the North Branch Watershed Work Group, for many, many, many years. That project was started in 1992 with Friends of the Chicago River and Lake County Stormwater Management. It's an effort to start to address stormwater management in the North Branch Chicago River watershed. We knew that development was going very fast, and we wanted to make sure that developers and municipalities were paying attention to the impacts of stormwater from developments on their neighbors. We started that project in 1996 and 1999 and 2003 with some money from the federal government and the state of Illinois to do a watershed plan, so to look at how all the different municipalities could work together to improve water quality, address stormwater, improve habitat, and that resulted in many, many, many best management practice projects that impact water quality or habitat, or usually both. Things like that big piece of equipment on the left is removing the Winnetka Road Dam just downstream of the Skokie Lagoons. That was really just an impediment to fish passage. It had outlived its useful life. And then on the right, we have some volunteers planting water willow and lizard's tail in the North Branch to provide additional habitat in the riparian zone, which is a great volunteer activity, and those plants only cost $1 and some change each, so it's a great low-cost volunteer activity. Improving water quality has always been a focus of our work and the focus on the North Branch. Really don't have too many big manufacturing facilities or tanneries anymore in Glenview or up on the North Shore or the north side even. But what we do have is lots of road salt and lots of nutrients in the form of lawn fertilizers and things. And that's where we get a lot of our pollution, especially in this section of the river. So those pictures are, the two pictures of the nutrient pollution are from the Skokie Lagoons. So that is duckweed in the Skokie Lagoons from 2023, I want to say, but very recently. So it is something that happens in our waterway and somewhere nearby that we get nutrient pollution. That's from excess fertilizers and things where you really don't, probably the chem lawns and things of the world put more of that stuff than they need to on our lawns. That gets washed into the waterways, like I said, with separated sewers. And then we have these kind of nutrient pollution problems. The picture on the right just shows a log jam with a bunch of trash. So that's one of the things that's sort of a pet peeve of mine, especially in the city. We've done so much to improve water quality standards. When you think about the city of Chicago, the water ultimately a lot of the time is clean enough for people to go swimming, but you don't really want to jump in when there's like a hot Cheetos bag and a Gatorade bottle floating by. So making sure people take responsibility. At the same time, we also have filters and things at outfalls to catch trash and to make sure that we're doing our part to address that. And then road salt, like I said, not nearly as much of a problem in the suburbs as it is in the city, but we do use an excess of road salt in Illinois. Really what we need at this point is the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency to help us out with some standards that we can start to base our road salt application on. So some of the big work that we do and some of the stuff that I really enjoy is the work that we do protecting and restoring native habitat in the area. So that can be everything from, most of the time we're addressing native plants and invasive species. So has anybody ever heard of buckthorn? I know a lot of people have, yeah. I knew the answer to that question. So we have a plant called buckthorn here that's really terrible, and that's one of the really most damaging invasive species to the Chicago River, frankly. It hinders growth of a native vegetation understory. At the same time, it adds to sedimentation in the river by letting soil just run off. So we do a lot of work raising money to work with the forest preserves and local park districts to do large-scale restoration projects that involve cutting and herbiciding buckthorn and then waiting to see sort of what the native seed source is and then augmenting that as needed. We also do a lot of work with fish habitat. The people on the left here are doing a fish survey, and this is somewhere in Northbrook or Glenview, but it's somewhere on the West Fork a few years ago. Just every 5 years, go up and take a look at what kind of fish are out and about in the river. One of the things that Friends of the Chicago River focuses on is our native bat population. So bats are really interesting because they're a key species to a healthy ecosystem. And we have, to that end, we participate in a couple of different projects. One, we've installed 6 bat colonies. So that's what those guys are doing there. That's at Chick Evans Golf Course. That's the nearest one to where we are now. Those are, as opposed to your sort of Boy Scout-sized bat houses, these ones house about 2,000 bats. And they are, and we've installed 6 of them, and we're really hopeful they're going to be successful. One of the reasons they wouldn't be successful is that bats have enough habitat, which would be a good reason to not be successful. So we'll see what happens, but we got some funding to do that. The other thing that we do is we participate with Lincoln Park Zoo, Urban Wildlife Institute, in bat monitoring. So we have what's called the Bat Pack. It's just a backpack with a big stick and an echolocator at the top of it that you plug into an iPad, and it just listens to bat sounds. And through that, we can identify species of bats. In the Chicago River right now, we've identified 7, and I should memorize these, but I always go to my cheat sheet, so sorry. And I'm actually a bat monitor, so it's sort of shameful. So we have the big brown bat, the little brown bat, the eastern red bat, the hoary bat, the evening bat, the tricolor bat, and the silver-haired bat. Friends of the Chicago River found the first little brown bat in the survey, and we found it on the North Shore Channel in Evanston, right in Evanston. So not a very quiet place. So that was really a sort of fun to understand that bats use such an urban environment. Another thing that we're really focused on is turtles. People love turtles. So we have something in our business sort of called the charismatic megafauna. So that's if you find something that people like. And what we found is when you restore turtle habitat, you get a lot of multiple benefits. So you get things like a restored native vegetation that soaks up a lot of stormwater. You get a vegetation habitat for birds. You get vegetative habitat for mammals. And we found by working with researchers, mainly with the Forest Preserve District of Cook County, that we have a very robust turtle population, but because of development, it's really losing places where they can lay eggs. And researchers at the Forest Preserve District had basically just glue a radio transmitter to the turtle shell. That's how you track turtles. They track turtles, and they also were tracking things like raccoons and coyotes and predators, and they found that predators would wait outside of common turtle nesting areas and just wait for them to lay their eggs and then go eat the eggs because they knew the turtles didn't have any options. So Friends decided to go for some grants to restore habitat for turtle nesting, and it was really successful. Usually when you do Habitat for Wildlife, it can take years for wildlife to kind of get comfortable and come back. But with us, they came back right away. This is a big snapping turtle, a real big snapping turtle. And one of the areas that we track turtles to is Chipley Woods, which is not too far from here, just upstream on the Middle Fork in the border of Northbrook and Northfield. And we found that as soon as we cleared an area, the very next season, turtles would go into that area to lay eggs. And that's really the basis of a lot of the future work that Friends is working on, is to look at turtles and try to center turtles in some of our work. So turtles in the North Branch watershed that are native to Illinois: snapping turtle, eastern box turtle, musk turtle, spiny softshell, painted turtle, and Blanding's turtle. We're working with a researcher from DePaul who's like a world-renowned turtle researcher on a lot of this work. And of course, birds. All this work, people love birds. We affect birds. Bald eagle, the osprey, the black-crowned night heron. They're, threatened, state-threatened species, and these are things that we have in the watershed that depend on the waterway for food. Here's a list of all the birds. I'm just kidding. I went to the osprey in the middle there is on a nest that we created in, I believe that's the Skokie Lagoons. We have one in the Skokie Lagoons, we have one in the Botanic Gardens, and we have a bunch of other ones throughout the watershed. But they also will nest on cell phone towers. I was just up at North Park in Lincolnshire, and they were nesting on a big set of soccer lights. So anything they can do to see fish. So one of the issues that we worked on for a long time that we had to address that really has an impact in this area was the low-head dams in the area. So we have, at the time I started working on dams, there were 4 dams that really blocked passage of mostly fish is what we were concerned with, but it also is the ecological benefits of having fish move around that they blocked from reaching the headwaters from the Chicago River. The main stem of the Chicago River is a nice source of fish because it's connected to the lake. So lake fish can get in there and you kind of get a recharge from downstream of species and population diversity. So there's a dam, the dam at the lowest end at West River Park, which is gone now, thankfully, was one that we identified for having major effects. So what we saw was that downstream of West River Park, where the habitat is not nearly as high quality as it, so we're upstream of West River Park right now, that we found twice as many total species, 3 times as many game species in all the trout and salmon in our study. So that told us that there was some sort of a barrier to those fish reaching the areas where they would most likely prefer to be. And that barrier was West River Park Dam. So in 2002, we started looking at removing that dam and working with Army Corps of Engineer and the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District. Finally, in 2018, after many discussions, we had, one of the funny discussions we had was at some point we had to decide, if you're familiar with a fish ladder like they have out west, you'll see salmon ladders where they jump up. We looked at doing a fish ladder instead of removing the dam because people were really worried about removing anything. Yeah, first we said modifying it, and they said, well, how are you going to modify it? And we said, we're going to take it out. So instead of modifying the dam, we looked at a fish ladder. And the fish ladder was going to have to be like a half-mile long. And we didn't understand why. And so the biologist said, well, your Midwest fish are not nearly as athletic as your Pacific Northwest fish. So we ditched the idea of a fish ladder. So in 2018, we finally got permission to remove the North Branch Dam. And this was the start of it. That's what it looked like before. They basically sandbagged half the river, took the dam out, let the river flow, took the other half, took the dam out, let the river flow. This is what the riffles look like. This is in January, just after the construction at the end of the summer.
Where's this at?
This is at the city, at Foster in the city, where the North Branch comes into the main part of the Chicago River, and where the North Shore Channel.
And you can see it right behind the North Park College Athletic.
Here's the Baha'i Temple. Here's the North Shore Channel, and this is the natural North Branch, and this is Foster right there. That's good. I'll put street names on that for my next one. Be no benefit to you guys, but this is a cool series I thought that is from a recent picture from the edge of the dam. This is a black-crowned night heron that's fishing, and if you follow it clockwise from the top left, you can see it's kind of looking for a fish, gets a fish in its mouth, and then the bottom left, it's eating that fish, and then it flies off. So this is just a great example, I think, that shows the success of that project in one fell swoop. It's a healthy fishery, it's healthy birds. This looks a whole lot better than a concrete bunker kind of thing. And really, it's something that's going to be there. No one's going to ever put another dam there. So it's something that's going to be there for a long, long time. So mussels, these are dated pictures, but these are outside on the West Fork. I included one picture of another speaker in here. This is at the West Fork at the Loyola Athletic Campus. When Loyola purchased that property, Friends of the Chicago River was concerned, or at least I'll say we were excited, because we had recently gone on a walk up the West Fork and found some intriguing mussels. And so we knew that property was changing hands, and so we met with science staff at Loyola and a researcher from the Shedd Aquarium to go out and take a look at what the mussel populations were adjacent to that site. And we found some really fun things that then we also started to go look at Techni Basin after that. So the river channel between the basin and Target, we did some mussel surveys in there. And what we found was that the West Fork and Glenview has some of the most robust, diverse mussel populations anywhere on the Chicago River. And that's counting all the mussels we found on the Loyola campus there in the left picture. Mussel surveys are really fun to do for volunteers. You just kind of have to be willing to put on waders and feel around the bottom of the river. We collect all those mussels, count them and ID them, and then put them back so nobody gets hurt in the making of this movie. And you can see by the ladies on the right that it's a pretty fun time. Sometimes when you get a mussel, they'll squeeze themselves together and squirt water out at you. So these are all the different kinds that we found in the Chicago River near basically from Willow Road to the end of the Loyola campus. One of these, the pond horn, I believe, is a state threatened mussel. So that was fun to find, and really an exciting time. What was not great news was that all the mussels were old. We didn't find any young mussels. That was one of the pieces of evidence that we used to really drive the dam removal, because mussels reproduce on the gills of fish. So the way that mussels reproduce is that mussels have this thing called trachea, which they let the fish hang out in the water, which is just like a snot of larvae. Yeah, that's really the easiest way to describe it. And a fish swims through that, and the mussels stick to the fish gills. And if you ever catch a fish, and if you look in its gills and you see a bunch of black spots, that can be mussel larvae. Mussels are some mussels don't care what kind of fish they reproduce on. Some mussels are really particular about the kind of fish. So what we can tell from mussel populations is if we find certain mussels, then we know certain fish must be there. And if we find mussels of a certain age, and we don't find any younger mussels, then we might be able to at least have a theory that fish were once there and they're not there anymore. And that's the kind of impact that the dam had. And it's, now that it's gone, hopefully doesn't have that impact anymore when we start to get those mussel surveys back. Mussel numbers rebounding. So I wanted to highlight the Techni Basin. I think the Techni Basin is one of the secret spots of the North Branch of the Chicago River. Somewhere I always take new hires at Friends because they're always shocked either that how full it is, if it's rained recently, or how vibrant it is when the plants are all going, or you see an egret, or I saw an osprey flying around out there the other day. So it's just a great spot that I wanted to highlight. I didn't want to say too much about it because I thought the next speaker might say something about it too. So that's my bit for today. I have a QR code if you want to sign up for our e-newsletter. We're really easy to reach online. We're on all the social media places, and that's my email and our website. So thank you so much.
Thank you, John. So Robin Flackney will be our final speaker, and she's recovering from a cold. So Robin was the Natural Resources Manager for the Village of Glenview from October 2000 until May of 2026. The role provided the opportunity to assist in the redevelopment of the Glenview Naval Air Station, with a focus on establishing Lake Glenview and Gallery Park natural areas, and initiating wetland mitigation, ecological restoration, and the Evelyn P. Steiner Interpretive Center at the Ken Fuller Air Station Prairie. She provided staff support as the Environment and Natural Resources Commission created a plan for nature and took the lead in its implementation through projects focused on improving habitat and water quality throughout Glenview. Many of these projects have received honors from organizations such as Chicago Wilderness and Friends of the Chicago River. Robin also became deeply involved in urban forest management as part of the response to the Emerald Ash Borer. This has included enforcing the village's tree preservation ordinance, creating tree planting and buckthorn removal incentive programs for private property, and writing the village's first urban forest management plan. The Morton Arboretum's Chicago Region Trees Initiative recognized Glenview as having the most innovative forestry program in 2015 and awarded Robin Flackney Forester of the Year in 2020 and former ENRC Chair Henrietta Saunders Urban Forest Innovator in 2024. Robin holds a PhD in forestry from the University of Minnesota. She wishes nothing but the best to the complex and interconnected urban ecosystems and living organisms of Glenview now and in the future. Please welcome our home natural resource.
Need a little technical assistance. Yeah, finding it. Where is it? Okay. No. It's a PDF.
Hang on, folks. Uh-oh.
I have a flash drive if
Yeah, do you want to just pull that up? And
Sure.
then just pull it up. Sorry about that.
that's all right.
All right. Sorry,
No problem.
must have got lost in the shuffle. There. Your intermission to get a cookie, some lemonade. I planned this. No, was it coming up?
No.
I'll just make a quick announcement. Technic Basin, some people still might not really know where it is. You can go park over by Target, but it's the other side. It's Kohl's, and cross the street, all right. And that's where we'll be gathering from 9 to noon on Saturday for cleanup. It's important to register that you can, you don't have to come the whole time. And it's really fun, get to know the river.
You want to identify yourself?
No.
That's Henrietta Saunders, Chair of the Environment and Natural Resources.
All right, I wanted to talk a little bit about all of the West Fork Corridor Village projects and opportunities we've had over the years. And we do recognize that we have this West Fork Corridor we've been talking about all night that runs through Glenview. And And others have mentioned that there are several different watersheds throughout Glenview, but the West Fork, I want to make the point that the West Fork to Glenview is an extremely important one. And we've made a lot of efforts to try to improve it and protect it over the years, and a lot of people have contributed to that, many people. And I appreciate all the help that we've had over the years and all the projects we've been able to do. There's much work left to be done, so so there will be plenty to continue. I should probably first point out that what's highlighted in the colored sections of the river as we move through here, those are areas where we have done projects or anticipate that we'll do projects. Most of them are projects that we've already completed, where we are trying to stabilize the stream bank or improve the water quality in some way. And I'll kind of walk through a number of these projects and spend more time on the first one just to get familiar. The projects are all kind of similar in their themes of trying to stabilize the stream banks, stop erosion, add native vegetation. And so I'll spend a little more on the first one and see how that kind of repeats throughout these projects. But we've had quite a few opportunities to go ahead and improve the river through Glenview as best we can. I do want to talk about the Environment and Natural Resources Commission for a minute. They have been part of Glenview for over 20 years, and they helped us create a plan for nature, did a whole lot of research prior to doing that, then created the plan, and then have been implementing it ever since. We've had many members over the years. Henrietta Saunders is here, and we've had different former members that are listed, and our current membership is shown on there as well. A big point I want to make is that the West Fork is up to us here in Glenview, in that you can see that we have other river systems, other watersheds. We have what the Middle Fork and Skokie River join together. They come through on the east side of Glenview, and that's over here. That is, yeah, right. And so that's within a forest preserve. And over on the west end of Glenview, we do have part of Glenview drains into the Des Plaines River that is also pretty much protected by forest preserves. Whereas at the West Fork, we just don't have as much green space around it. We do have parks up and down. We do have small village-owned spaces that aren't shown on this map exactly, but we're on the previous map. This is our biggest one, our Techni Basin area on the West Fork. And then as we move through, we do have small areas, but you see that most of the West Fork is unprotected. It doesn't have a buffer of natural area all around it like the others do. So, so it's very important for Glenview to think about the West Fork and what we can do for it and how to keep it protected. So the West Fork of the North Branch of the Chicago River, another reason it's very important to us is about 71% of the village of Glenview drains to it. So most of Glenview is draining straight into the West Fork of the Chicago River. About 15% goes into the east, and then another about 15% goes into the Des Plaines on the west. And in addition to how much of Glenview drains to the West Fork, we also contribute almost a third of the West Fork watershed out of the whole watershed. Glenview is about a third of it for the West Fork. So, so what we do has a huge impact on the West Fork of Glenview and the West Fork River. So it's very important we think about where we are and what we can do to improve that. Who else lives here? John did a great job of explaining all the different creatures that live in our watershed along with us and find these open spaces and the natural areas wherever they can, and made a great point about the mussels. And the mussels is something that we're very proud of in Glenview, our mussels. And when the survey was done through Glenview to look at various surveys have been done, but during that survey in 2002, I think it was, they discovered a couple of different kinds of mussels that just hadn't been reported from the watershed previously. So we were excited about that. And there was a paper about that in 2004. So you can look it up, but we do have some that they're not that they were necessarily terribly uncommon, but they just hadn't been reported from the part of the river. And so that was exciting. Mussels themselves are very endangered, so there's something to keep an eye on. Freshwater mussels are having a hard time these days, and there's a lot of reasons. But anything we can do to improve their lot is a good idea. So when we think about water quality and what's going on with, and why, when things drain to the river, why that's a big deal, John covered that as well, very well. It's picking up pollutants as it goes. So all those fertilizers, all those oils, all the dog waste, et cetera, is going straight to the river. And so that is something that we are trying to think of ways that we can buffer that and lessen the impact of that going straight into the river. And as we build up, as we get more and more developed, we also mentioned how developed we really are. As that happens, we get more and more runoff into those rivers, and we get very flashy events where the river bounces up really quickly and then comes back down really quickly. So recognizing all of that, the Environment and Natural Resources Commission did make a plan for nature in Glenview and spent some time researching the area before they did that, and then created projects. We had projects that took place before, but then we kind of got really organized and decided to make a plan and go forward and very strategically determine where we could do some projects. And we have Ken Fuller to thank for that, who is pictured here doing a survey in a canoe along the West Fork, just looking at the conditions and just going from top of Glenview to the bottom, looking at what we had and what was available for ideas and projects. Prior to the Plan for Nature, we had done projects. We had done things like the redevelopment of the Navy base. We had created Gallery Park in Lake Glenview. We had done some restoration at the North Navy Ditch that drains Lake Glenview. And we had seeded the Techni Basin to native vegetation. And we had done Lot 16 stream bank stabilization. That was our very first stream bank stabilization project, and we'll be talking a lot about those kinds of projects as we go forward. So our West Fork Corridor Habitat Project really got started when we did Lot 16. So I thought of it, I didn't think of it at the time as a phase one, but as we went over and we did more and more projects, they just became phases of the same project. We're looking at the corridor, we're looking at everything top to bottom of Glenview, and we are figuring out where we have opportunities to add native vegetation, to add habitat, and to stabilize the stream bank and improve the water quality. And the focus is on the water quality, and this is the big secret was that I didn't know that we could get funding for this until John Quayle came to visit us one day and took us on a tour of the river, and walking through the river, talked about that there is federal funding that's available that could help provide grants to do projects that benefited water quality. And so water quality became a big theme going forward, and the first one was the Lot 16 stabilization.
Robin, can you say where the Lot 16 is?
So Lot 16, yeah, it's a very good point that we don't have good ways of naming things. We're not very good namers in Glenview, and most of these have very boring and weird nondescript names. Lot 16 is just, see if I go back to the first slide and show the map. It is just at the north end of the river when it comes in by the Techni Basin and just south of Willow Road. So when the river enters Glenview at Willow Road, Lot 16 is just a couple thousand feet down from there. See if
Is Illinois Bone and Joint still right next door to it?
yeah, some landmarks are.
It's like right next to Illinois Bone and Joint Institute, if you know where that is.
So when we talk about Lot 16, it actually doesn't show, it should be a colored band right here. It doesn't show up, but it's right south of Techni Basin. The hospice that's a good landmark. And it's just north of the Loyola Academy athletic fields. And yeah, so it is, as I say, I think of it as just a stretch of the river south of Willow Road as it enters Glenview. And there's a little gravel parking lot where you can park and walk around the Techni Basin. And then lot 16 is the strip of land just south of that gravel parking lot. So we have done a number of projects, including that first one at lot 16, Reach 1. We'll go through a few of these. So as I think of the phases, we've done about 7 projects that are focused, that are right on the river. We've done other projects that support the river that aren't necessarily directly on the river. And that's important that everything we do in the watershed is draining to the watershed. So we have to think about all the ways that we add native vegetation, and we protect the streets. We are improving water quality if we think about what we're doing and dumping on the ground and what we're keeping clean all through our daily lives. So lot 16, here is this photo of where it is. This is the condition it was in when we got our funding. It had an extremely eroded bank, and it extended for quite some ways, about 310 feet. We added some riffle and pool structures. This is something we do in our stabilization projects often to improve water quality by aerating the stream and creating a little bit habitat diversity within the stream. And then we were able to add about a little more than ½ acre of native plantings and wetland plugs. And that is, again, that idea is that vegetation stabilizes the soil, holds onto the soil, and it also filters pollutants before they hit the river. So this is an example of installing a riffle installation along lot 16. And just to show kind of what that looks like, just adding structure into the river that will churn up the water a little bit and add some aeration, adds that habitat that into that mostly silty and mucky bottom. We add some boulder kind of substrate, and that will diversify the kind of insects that can thrive there. And we then regraded it. This is something we don't always get the chance to do because most of our projects are very narrow. We don't get a chance to soften out that grade. So in this case, though, we had a chance to smooth that out a little bit along the stream bank and make it a little bit smoother transition from the water to the land. Seeding and planting, when it was completed, and then it grew in about a year later. And then over the years, it's just been growing more and more prairie vegetation, and we do continue to add seed periodically and try to diversify the prairie mix out there and try to keep that habitat going. Our second project was at Reach 1. This is very, very close to Willow Road. And we did a small one, a little like sort of mini stabilization project that was almost a test while we were researching what we could do with the Chicago River, the West Fork through Glenview. We experimented. We had done a little bit over at lot 16. We decided to do another smaller project along Reach 1. Again, we had an eroding stream bank, and we had an opportunity to smooth it out a little bit and add more native vegetation. But we had our eyes on a bigger project that we did get to after a couple more years. So this is kind of, as it grew in, it became very much of a prairie and some willow shrubs and those kinds of things. A nice habitat from a previously eroding area. Then we bounced down to downtown. So this project was the West Fork Green Stabilization. This is south of Glenview Road at the river. There's a restaurant there now. So it shares space with this restaurant. So there is the stream bank stabilization remains in place. Some of the upland part we did lose to the project, but the stream bank stabilization is still functioning pretty well there. We did lose also this stairwell that you may have remembered, that this was kind of an odd and unstable staircase down to the base from a parking lot at what we called the West Fork Green. So that was removed when the restaurant was built, and there were a few other like small benefits of the restaurant going in, but overall, we did retain some of the essential features of that project, which included the riffle and pool structures, some willows that are stabilizing the bank. We eliminated all that buckthorn and added native trees and shrubs and a little bit of native prairie as well. Then we went back up to the Reach one, to right below Willow Road again. As the river enters Glenview, we had done our little mini project of a eroding stream bank, but then we came back and had an opportunity, a really big opportunity from American Recovery and Reinvestment Act money that funded a major project to re-meander and add riffles and pools and do a whole lot more than we did with most typical stabilization projects. We were able to just create a whole bunch of habitat diversity that we had not had the opportunity to do before. So, so this is kind of the design and the plan that we chose to add 11 riffles and pools. So much more than most of our projects involve, and a much longer area. We added wetland channels, little like back channels, wetland terraces, open water pockets. We just did about 5 of those, and we're able to just create a much more diverse and more thriving ecosystem. So that river from Willow Road down along, and this is across from, say, Aldi, Target, Kohl's, that Willow Creek shopping center is right across the way from this project. And the river there has been really kind of transformed. We didn't really re-meander it because we didn't have enough space for that. We had more space than in most projects. But the way we always phrase it, instead of re-meandering it and allowing it to run more sinuously like a river naturally does, we added wiggles. We wiggled it. And so that was a great opportunity. And this is kind of, we always had the egrets, that was our council watching us, everything we did during that project. And they kept evaluating it every day. And we had to put the river in a pipe. There was a lot of really interesting construction challenges with the project, and it turned out to be a really special one. And this is again a review, kind of a little bit farther south than what we had looked at previously, looking up towards the north, towards Willow Road. And you can see on the left-hand side, one of the wetland open water wetland pockets that we had created. This is basically what it looked like just a couple of years ago. We still have our council. They're out there still every day. I promise you, go out there and you'll find them every day. So, then we went back downtown. We were able to do a river walk. This had been something that we had wanted to do for a while. And it's a short one. It's just north of Glenview Road along Heinens. So when Heinens came and created their grocery store, they asked us a little bit about that back area, and we had always kind of wanted to do a project there, so that was an impetus, and we did get 319 funding for that as well. So we were able to do a stabilization project that added habitat, and it helped us get rid of a whole lot of buckthorn and some dead cottonwoods and things like that Heinens actually had objected to. So we hopped to it and made a project to encourage them to come to Glenview. And this was kind of the plan that we had for it, to add some trees, add some more biodiversity, more native plants, stabilize the stream bank, add a couple of riffles. Again, just trying to improve habitat and water quality in a kind of narrow and very restricted space. We couldn't regrade here. We didn't have a lot of opportunity to do a lot of different work, but we did what we could. And again, a pretty successful project. We started out with Boy Scouts helping us cut down buckthorn, and then got some serious equipment in there and got the rest out, got all the larger trees that had been dying. We had volunteers help us plan. It's always so important to get the community involved, and so when we can get scouts and volunteers to help us, we do our best to do that. This is basically how it looked like over the years. So in July of 2017, and then in August of 24, and then this was just last year's River Day. This was River Day cleanup. So people are still out there interacting with the downtown river, and that's a great, one of the things I really like about the downtown sites is that people aren't necessarily going out looking for a natural area, they just come across it, and I just like that it's just part of daily life, that they'll be just in a natural area for a brief moment, have a chance to interact with it. Pine Street Stream Bank Stabilization. This is when I get a chance to say thank you to my interns who are always out there helping me write our grant applications and showing how eroded that bank really was, just as for scale, to show that it is something that needed attention. And so we did get funding to go in. These were areas, Pine Street Stream Bank Stabilization took place in an area where the village had bought homes that had been repeatedly flooded. And with the help of FEMA, with the help of IEMA, MWRD, we purchased the homes, demolished them, and then we had a field that really wasn't being used for anything and there was nothing that could be built there. And it was a great opportunity to come in and take care of the stream bank and add some habitat. So overall, we were able to stabilize 764 linear feet, get some riffle and pool structures in again, get in some bioswales and rain gardens, some features that we hadn't had elsewhere, where we have some space to include these kinds of features to absorb water. Some of the water actually comes off the street, so we can intercept that before it hits the river by adding rain gardens and bioswales, and then trees and shrubs, etc. Then we did a similar project at another floodplain buyout. This was at Long Valley Stream Bank Stabilization. So I want to say thank you to the tree keepers who came out. Henrietta led the tree keepers, and also who came out for that day, where there were also scouts, there were leaders of that Environment and Natural Resources Commission, like Scott Daniels and Chris Newman. So there's always so much support and there's so much interest, and so it means a lot to people to come out and they help, and they plant the trees, they plant the plugs, and they just care about the place, and it's really heartening to have those events. This is then how it looked in just a year later after that work day. So it sometimes can come along pretty quickly. It's got a ways to go. It is off. If you know Central, by across from the McDonald's on Waukegan down. So and then you go east from there. No, you go. Yeah, you go east from there, and there's a dead end at the river, and on a street called Long Valley. So they're not necessarily at highly prominent spots, but they're right adjacent to the river. And one of the points I did want to make again is that it doesn't have to be just on the river to make a difference. So these detention basins, these all drain into the river eventually. So if we can filter water and get it cleaner before it's released into the sewer system and then eventually into the river, then we are making a huge difference just by planting native vegetation and filtering water. Even though we don't see the river, we're not right by it, it's there. We are affecting it with everything that we do. So if we're doing positive things, we can affect the water quality positively. So we did a few projects again with 319 funding to add, to take turf vegetation away from these, what I mean by retrofitting. We didn't really retrofit the detention basins. We removed turf vegetation and added native vegetation and a lot of different wetland plants and some interesting features. And then we were able to do some planting days. And we say thank you to all the students. Again, students help us, scouts help us, lots of community members help us, and Nancy, who is, again, one of our Environment and Natural Resources commissioners, came out and helped doing one of our detention basin plantings. These are how they looked in 2025. And then we do try to reach out to the public and have residents create rain gardens on their own properties. So we subsidize that to some extent. And that, again, this is just all throughout the watershed. We are asking people to help us, and many people do respond, and some of them are very beautiful, some of the installations. Then we have our bioswales and permeable pavement. Again, these are meant to intercept stormwater and filter it prior to getting into the sewer system and going into the, so it's to form a little bit of treatment before it gets to the river. And green roofs also serve that function. So we have that, we have one example at the Tyner Center. We have tree programs. Again, just even planting a tree, they all act as mini detention basins. They'll hold water for a while and not let it hit the ground. Often that water will evaporate before it ever gets to the ground. If it does get to the ground, it will come in a little bit slower. So you get your first initial runoff, and then the rest of the runoff coming off the tree comes more slowly down the tree, down off the leaves or down the trunk, and comes a little bit later. And so it doesn't cause that as much of a spike. So like I said, little mini detention basins, and they do a lot to help filter and clean stormwater. And we do try to encourage people to plant them. We have incentive programs for planting on private property, and we have incentive programs to remove buckthorn. And again, it's another, we have our Tree City USA program. We reach out to students and talk to them about trees. So I say thank you to Chuck Balling, who also came out to talk about trees for the past couple of years at Glenbrook South High School. And then we have also done a lot of pollinator hubs and river cleanups. So these are other events that support the river, even though they, the pollinator hubs aren't directly on the river cleanups certainly are. The pollinator hubs are scattered throughout town, areas where we are adding habitat that's upland habitat. It's not necessarily wetland or river habitat, but it is filtering water. It is causing more water to be stored on site instead of running off in the first place. And so we have done a number of those. We say thanks to the Scouts and to the entire Glenview community. For our river cleanups, we say definitely thanks to the entire Glenview community. And as John mentioned, the entire Chicago region comes out for the river cleanups in some cases. And Rob and Chris from our Environment and Natural Resources Commission were at this one. And then I have explained a lot of what Glenview does to support the river. So, any questions?
So we only have about 5 or 6 minutes for questions. Maybe rather than pulling the chairs up, maybe if the speakers can come up to the mic.
Yep.
And I have taken the privilege of asking the first question, and it's for John about the bats. Has there been any evidence of that eastern bat fungus affecting our bats?
I don't know. I will encourage everybody to go to the Urban Wildlife Institute website. I should know more as a bat monitor, but I don't know. I'm sorry I can't really answer that one. I want to say we haven't had any real issues with that right now, but it's something the researchers are certainly paying close attention to.
A question, I don't know who's saying, did the Skokie River always meander its way into the West Fork and the Middle Fork, or was that recreated when the CCC redug the Skokie lagoons?
Want me to answer?
Go for it.
Yeah. It always did, yeah. So like where Waters Meet Woods is where the Skokie River and the Middle Fork come together, the aptly named Waters Meet Woods. And then that forms what still is called the Skokie River, and then that meets up with the West Fork and the Chick Evans Golf Course, which is why if you like to play golf, Chick Evans is often not playable. So it was often a marshy swamp, so where those channels wasn't necessarily in the same place year to year, pre-European settlement. That became more channelized, especially with local agriculture, but were always three separate watersheds, 3 separate channels.
I think it was the city of Chicago in the late 80s, early 90s, built something that they refer to as the big tunnel, the big something. Does our river get access to that? I cross the river at Sleepy Hollow Park almost daily, and when we've had big storms, the river goes really high, and then all of a sudden I'll cross about hours later, and it will be down 2 or 3 feet.
Yeah. So that's a natural, Robin mentioned flashiness in a real urban environment like this goes up quickly because the river, the environment has so much non-permeable surface, so water just hits concrete and runs off right into the river. The rivers are also being straightened and channelized or designed to really move water through as fast as possible. What you're thinking about is called the deep tunnel, the tunnel and reservoir plan, it's also called. So that's a series of 3 tunnels that are about 300 feet below the river. So that starts in the combined sewer area. So that the deep tunnels are designed to, when you hear about even recently big floods in the city where sewage backs up into people's basements. So that's designed to address that problem. It is supposed to be, when I started at Friends in 2000, it was going to be done in 2009. Right now, it's supposed to be done in 2029, although they may be kicking that back to 2032. So it's just a perpetual. It's a good public works project that gives a lot of people jobs.
First of all, I'd like to say thank you. It sounds like you're finishing up your work, but the improvement in Techni Basin, in particular, over the 30 years I've lived in Glenview, has just been fantastic. But I do have a question, because John, you mentioned about how the dams sometimes can be harmful to the river, yet at the north end of Techni, you've got a dam, and then at the kind of that choke point where you come into that Project 16 area, was it?
The lot 16, yeah.
Yeah, there's another small little, what appears to be a dam. Why are those there, and will they be removed, or?
So the dam at Willow Road is just creates a little detention basin on the other side that the MWRD owns. There's not really a dam per se along the basin. There's a culvert there that restricts water a little bit, and there's also, when the basin fills up, there's a diversion device that allows water to go out at a certain rate once that basin's full. So the dam at Willow Road is not one that Friends has targeted, I'll say, as of yet for removal, partly because it's pretty high up in the watershed, so it would be a big project and it wouldn't free up that much stream. Although at the end of the day, most of the dams in the watershed have outlived their useful life. A lot of them were created like the Tamos, let's say Chick Evans has a dam for the golf course, the one that was at Winnetka Road. Those were both built to hold water in the channel when the stream was more intermittent in the summer, so all the golf course features would go dry. So they had the dam there to make sure they would have water on the golf course. And now they have an opposite problem because there's so much runoff. So it wasn't a big, getting those removed was mostly talking to the owners and making them understand that the dams had outlived their useful life. A lot of times they were in disrepair. I don't know if we have any lawyers in the room. That's a liability issue. So some of the time it's just easier to take those things away, and the ecological benefits really were huge and helped to pay for some of that stuff. We'll go over here and then back over there. Yeah, go ahead.
Has there ever been any record of anything leaching out of a dump into the river?
There have not in Glenview. So there have been landfills are notorious for having stuff leak out of them. The technology is always changing about how they work with the landfills. When we worked with the big landfill where the Loyola athletic campus is now, we really worked hard to get native planting there. To do that, because native plants put roots down so far and they were worried about it getting into the landfill, we had to really take a deep look at what was in there. And that landfill is just construction debris from the construction of 94. So it's not household municipal waste or hazardous waste or any of those kind of things. So they do monitor it. That landfill is not really an issue, but landfills are definitely not leak proof. Let's go back here and then back over here. Over here in the corner.
We have in my condominium area detention spots. I think that's what they're referred to, not retention ponds, but spots that are designed to accumulate the rain and then gradually release it into the sewer system. We've got turf there now, and I'm very interested in planting something naturally. Where can I go for resources to find out what should be planted in that area?
I'm gonna let Robin answer this one. Somebody else.
I mean, there's really quite a lot of information available. I would probably look at the Chicago Botanic Garden and talk to them. They have a lot of like written material that would help, and there are seed lists that are available for those kinds of things. So I think like a reference librarian at the Chicago Botanic Garden could find those seed lists really quickly. Yeah.
We have time for one more question.
Are you in the middle?
You mentioned that there are funding available to like illuminate buckthorn or plant trees on residential property. I'm the president of the condo association nearby. We've got 3 buildings. We're totally residential. There's no businesses on the first floor or anything, but we're told that we're not eligible. Am I missing something, or is there a possibility that the Pleasant pressure could be provided so that one day we could qualify?
So is there, so let me ask about how you got told that and what the plan is, what you're like seeking to do.
Well, let's just take buckthorn. We've got big grounds, so there's a number of things, but buckthorn would be a real logical choice. And really, for the trees, in the tree advertisement that the village put out kind of in the beginning of the year, or maybe last year, and it said, you know, except for multifamily dwellings. Well, okay, we're multifamily. It seems like condominiums at the moment aren't eligible for FEMA. If a tornado comes and hits us, we don't get FEMA help. And I don't know why that is. It's a little scary. But.
So for the village's buckthorn removal program, I don't think it excludes multifamily. The only thing is that it would have to be, you have to remove all of the buckthorn on the property. And so it might not be quite appropriate because it's only a like $600 maximum reimbursement. So it would mean you'd have to commit to be spending maybe quite a lot and not get a very big reimbursement back for it. So that might be the way it's a little bit inappropriate, but you're not ineligible. It's just that it might not be a huge contribution to the project. And then as for homeowner associations and condo associations, if the board applies, they can plant up to 2 trees, like 2 trees per year, calendar year. And a single family residential unit can plant 1 tree per year with the program. So you're eligible.
Okay, so I just have to keep asking.
So get Robin before she retires. Thank you all for coming. And thank you to our great speakers.
Thank you so much for having me.
This was great.